Have you ever been somewhere beautiful and suddenly realized you were not alone? A peaceful beach in Thailand, a school trip in the streets of Brussels, a midnight drive through the frozen wilderness of Norway. 3 different countries, 3 unforgettable journeys. But behind every beautiful destination was a terrifying moment when ordinary travelers realized something was very wrong. A stranger following them through empty roads, a person entering their room while they slept, a mysterious driver who refused to stop watching. They thought they were just exploring the world. They never expected the world to fight back. These are 3 true travel horror stories that prove one thing. Sometimes the most dangerous moments happen when you feel the safest. When I was 24 years old, I decided to take my first solo trip outside of North America. I wanted an adventure. I wanted to experience a completely different culture, meet new people, and prove to myself that I could travel alone. After searching for affordable destinations, I chose Thailand. The country looked perfect. Beautiful beaches, amazing food, friendly locals, and countless travelers online talking about how unforgettable their experiences were. For the first part of the trip, everything was exactly how I imagined it. I spent my days exploring Bangkok, trying local food, and visiting smaller coastal towns. Every place felt exciting. The people were welcoming. The scenery was incredible, and most importantly, I never once felt like I was in danger. But during the second half of my trip, everything changed. I booked a small hotel outside of Krabi for 3 nights. It wasn't a luxury resort or some expensive beachfront property. It was a quiet little hotel with around 20 rooms spread across several small buildings. The location was what attracted me. 3 sides of the hotel were surrounded by thick jungle, and the 4th side opened toward the ocean. It was peaceful, isolated, and exactly the kind of place I thought would make my trip unforgettable. At first, it did. On my second day there, I rented a scooter and spent the afternoon exploring the area. I drove along the coastline, stopped at small viewpoints, and enjoyed the freedom of being somewhere completely unfamiliar. As the sun began to set, I stopped at a small roadside restaurant about 20 minutes away from my hotel. There were only a few people there. I ordered dinner, had a couple of beers, and enjoyed the quiet atmosphere before starting my ride back. By the time I left, it was already dark. The road back to the hotel was mostly empty. It was a long coastal road with very little traffic. At first, I was enjoying the ride. Then I noticed something. A scooter was behind me. I didn't think much of it. On a road like that, it was completely normal for another person to be traveling in the same direction. But after a few minutes, something started feeling wrong. Every time I slowed down, the scooter slowed down. Every time I sped up, the scooter sped up. At first, I tried convincing myself that I was imagining things. Maybe the person was just driving carefully. Maybe they were going to the same area. But the longer it continued, the stranger it felt. Finally, I decided to test it. I pulled over completely and pretended to check something on my phone. The scooter passed me. For a moment, I felt relieved. I thought, okay, maybe I was just being paranoid. But then I looked ahead. About 50 yards down the road, the scooter pulled over and stopped. The rider was just sitting there, waiting. I stayed where I was for around 30 seconds, watching. That was when I realized something was seriously wrong. I turned my scooter around and started driving in the opposite direction. I continued until I found a small gas station where several people were standing outside. I parked there and waited. For about 15 minutes, I tried to calm myself down. Eventually, I started thinking maybe I had overreacted. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just a coincidence. So I decided to continue back to my hotel. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. And I had no idea that this was only the beginning. When I finally arrived back at the hotel, everything looked completely normal. The quiet pathways, the sound of the ocean, the dark jungle surrounding the property. Nothing seemed unusual. For a moment, I felt relieved. I told myself I had probably imagined the whole thing. Maybe the scooter rider was just another traveler going the same way. Maybe I was letting my imagination get the best of me because I was alone in a foreign country. The next morning, I tried to forget about it. I spent most of the day at the beach, enjoying the reason I had come to Thailand in the first place. The weather was perfect. The water was calm. Everything felt peaceful again. But around noon, something caught my attention. Near the tree line, away from most of the tourists, there was a man sitting alone. At first, I didn't think anything of it. But then I noticed something strange. He wasn't swimming. He wasn't looking at the ocean. He wasn't using his phone. He was just sitting there, watching people. Something about him felt familiar. I kept looking at him, trying to figure out why. Then it hit me. The jacket. He was wearing the same dark jacket as the rider from the night before. I froze for a second. I couldn't see the rider's face clearly the previous night, so I couldn't be 100% sure. Maybe it was a different person. Maybe it was just my fear connecting two unrelated things. But my instincts were telling me something was wrong. I decided to leave the beach. As I walked back toward the hotel, I casually looked behind me. The man was walking too. He wasn't following directly behind me. He kept enough distance to make it look normal, but he was moving in the same direction. That was enough. I walked faster and made my way back to my room. Once inside, I locked the door and stayed there for most of the afternoon. I kept replaying everything in my head. The scooter, the road, the beach, the man. Was I actually being followed, or was I just a nervous tourist imagining danger everywhere? That evening, I decided to tell the person working at the front desk. I explained what happened. The employee listened politely, but he didn't seem too worried. He told me that many tourists traveling alone become nervous, and that I should call the hotel if anything serious happened. After hearing myself explain the story out loud, I started feeling embarrassed, because when I said it aloud, it sounded almost ridiculous. A man was on the road. A man was at the beach. That was it. There was no proof. No confrontation. Nothing actually happened. So I convinced myself I was overthinking. That night, I went to bed feeling foolish. I thought the whole thing was over. But at around 2 o'clock in the morning, I suddenly woke up. The room was completely dark except for a small amount of moonlight coming through the curtains. I sat up, still half asleep, and then I heard something outside. At first, I thought it was an animal moving around, but then I heard it again. Footsteps, slow footsteps. My room was on the ground floor, and the footsteps were getting closer, until they stopped, right outside my window. I stopped breathing. I didn't move. I didn't even know what to think. Then, after a few seconds, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Someone was trying the door handle, slowly, carefully, like they didn't want to make noise. And in that moment, I knew. Someone was standing outside my room. My entire body went still. I sat there in the darkness, listening. The door handle slowly returned to its original position. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. I tried convincing myself that maybe it was nothing. Maybe another guest had the wrong room. Maybe someone was drunk and confused. I was searching for any explanation that would make sense. But then, it happened again. This time, the handle moved harder. Someone was definitely trying to open my door. My heart started racing. I grabbed my phone immediately and tried calling the front desk. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. Then I remembered something important. The hotel didn't have overnight staff. The front office closed at night. I was completely alone. The footsteps moved away from the door. For a moment, I thought maybe the person had left, but something inside me told me I needed to know what was happening. I don't know why I did it. Looking back, it was probably the most dangerous decision I made that night. I slowly got out of bed and walked toward the window. The room was almost completely dark. I carefully pulled back a tiny corner of the curtain, and that's when I saw him. A man was crouching directly beneath my window, looking up. For a second, neither of us moved. The world felt frozen. Then he noticed movement behind the curtain. The moment our eyes met, he stood up and ran. I immediately stepped away from the window. My entire body was shaking. I locked myself in the bathroom and stayed there. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I just waited. I sat there for hours, listening to every sound outside, wondering if he was still there. Every small noise made me panic. The jungle sounds, the wind, the movement of branches. Everything felt threatening. Finally, morning arrived. Around 7 a.m., the hotel owner showed up. The moment I saw another person, I felt a huge sense of relief. I told him everything that happened. The scooter following me, the man at the beach, the footsteps outside my room, the person trying my door, the man beneath my window. And for the first time since this started, someone looked genuinely concerned. The owner asked me to describe the person. I explained everything I could remember. The clothes, the appearance, the behavior. Then he suddenly pulled out his phone. He opened a picture, and my stomach dropped. It was him. The same man. The owner told me that this person was not a guest at the hotel. He wasn't staying there. Apparently, local businesses in the area had reported problems with him before. He had been seen following tourists, sometimes for days. Nobody knew exactly what he wanted because every time authorities were contacted, he disappeared before police arrived. Hearing that made everything feel real. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't being paranoid. Someone really had been watching me, and somehow, he had followed me all the way back to my hotel. I didn't want to spend another minute there. I packed my bags immediately. The owner helped me arrange transportation to another hotel closer to town. I thought leaving that place would finally end the nightmare, but during the drive, something happened that made me realize I might not have escaped him yet. I left the hotel behind thinking the worst part was finally over. The owner had helped arrange transportation to another hotel closer to town, and as the vehicle drove away from that isolated area, I started feeling like I could finally breathe again. The jungle disappeared behind us. The quiet roads turned into busier streets. I kept looking out the window, trying to convince myself that everything was over. But then, about 2 hours later, we stopped at a small convenience store. I needed to buy a bottle of water, so I stepped inside. Everything seemed normal. People were walking around. Cars were passing by. For the first time that day, I felt like I was back in a normal environment. I paid for my water and casually looked outside the window. And then, I saw something that made my entire body freeze. Across the road, there was a scooter parked underneath a tree. The rider was sitting there, watching the store, watching me. Even from a distance, I recognized him. The dark jacket, the same posture, the same feeling. It was him, the man who had followed me the night before, the man who had appeared at the beach, the man who had been standing outside my room at 2 o'clock in the morning. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. I just stared. Then, as if he knew I had seen him, he started the scooter and drove away. I never saw him again. To this day, I still don't know what he wanted. Maybe he planned to rob me. Maybe he wanted to break into my room. Maybe something much worse. The truth is, I'll never know, because he never actually made a move. He just watched. He followed. He appeared wherever I went. And somehow, he always seemed to know exactly where I was. The part that still bothers me the most is thinking about that night. A foreign country, a quiet hotel surrounded by jungle, a room on the ground floor, and a stranger crouching beneath my window in the middle of the night. I had traveled alone because I wanted independence. I wanted adventure. I wanted to prove I could handle being somewhere unfamiliar by myself. And I still believe traveling alone can be one of the most rewarding experiences a person can have. But that trip taught me something important. Sometimes your instincts notice danger before your mind can explain why. That feeling you get when something doesn't seem right. Don't ignore it, because when I first noticed that scooter behind me on the empty coastal road, I almost convinced myself it was nothing. When I saw the man at the beach, I almost convinced myself I was imagining things. When I heard someone outside my room, I almost convinced myself there was a harmless explanation, but every warning sign was real, and ignoring those signs could have ended very differently. I've traveled to many countries since that trip. I've had incredible experiences. I've met amazing people. I've seen places I never thought I would see. But nothing has ever matched the feeling of opening that curtain at 2 o'clock in the morning and seeing a stranger staring back at me from beneath my window. That image is something I will never forget. When I was 17 years old, my school organized a 5-day trip to Brussels, Belgium. It was supposed to be a fun experience. I was traveling with several of my closest friends, and we were excited to explore a different country together. Most of the trip was planned by the school, so our days were filled with scheduled activities, tours, and group events. And, honestly, most of it was great. We laughed a lot, explored the city, and made memories that I still remember today. But there was always one thing about me. I liked doing things outside the schedule. I liked exploring places I wasn't supposed to go. Not because I wanted trouble, I just enjoyed the excitement of doing something spontaneous. By the 4th day, the trip was almost over. The next morning, we had to wake up extremely early because our bus was leaving at 5 a.m. for the long journey back to Denmark. Everyone was exhausted. Most of my classmates went to bed early, trying to get a few hours of sleep before the trip home. But I was never good at sleeping early. The city was still awake, and I wasn't ready for the night to end. I sat outside the room I shared with 3 other guys from my school and started scrolling through my phone. Eventually, I opened Tinder and started chatting with some girls I had matched with. After some time, I actually managed to arrange a meeting with one of them. She lived a few kilometers away. Looking back now, I realize how reckless that decision was. I was only 17 years old. I was alone, in a foreign country, at night. But at the time, I was excited. I grabbed the key to our building and left. The building we were staying in was an old place used mainly by our school group, along with a few strangers. As I walked through the streets of Brussels, I felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. It was my first time really exploring the city alone. I followed the GPS on my phone toward the girl's apartment. Along the way, I passed through areas I had never seen before. I saw streets filled with neon lights, crowded bars, and people living a completely different lifestyle from what I was used to. Some older men shouted things at me as I walked past. It was the first time I had ever experienced anything like that. At first, I found it strange, almost unreal. But the farther I went, the more uncomfortable I became. The girl lived in an area that felt completely different from the parts of Brussels I had seen with my school. The streets were darker, the buildings looked older, groups of men stood around narrow alleys, and being a 17-year-old kid walking alone at night, I started feeling like maybe I had made a mistake. But I kept going. Eventually, I arrived at her apartment. Surprisingly, everything was normal. We talked. We had a good time. Nothing suspicious happened. After a while, I decided it was time to leave. I opened my phone and started following the GPS back to the hotel. That was when the night started getting worse. The streets were now completely dark. The temperature had dropped. Rain started falling. And the route my GPS chose was not the same way I had come. I found myself walking through unfamiliar streets. No tourists, no familiar buildings, just empty roads and groups of strangers standing around. Then, the worst possible thing happened. My phone screen went black. My battery was dead. I was completely lost. And I was standing alone in a foreign city with no way to check where I was. That was the moment I realized I had put myself into a situation I might not be able to control. For a few seconds, I just stood there in the rain staring at my dead phone. I couldn't believe it. A few hours earlier, I was excited about my little adventure. Now I was alone in a completely unfamiliar part of Brussels with no map, no directions, and no idea how to get back to the hotel. I looked around. Nothing seemed familiar. The streets were empty. The buildings looked different from anything I had passed earlier. The people around me were mostly groups of men standing near small alleys and dark corners. And suddenly, the excitement I had felt earlier disappeared. I wasn't exploring anymore. I was lost. I knew I had to do something quickly. Standing there and panicking wasn't going to help. So I walked up to the first person I saw, a man passing by on the street. He immediately noticed that I was confused and struggling. He could tell I was young and probably not from the area. Luckily, instead of ignoring me, he stopped and listened. I explained that I was a student visiting Brussels with my school. I told him I had gone to meet someone and that my phone had died while I was trying to get back. I asked him if he could help me find my way toward the city center. He seemed like a normal, friendly person, a man around my father's age. I don't remember many details about his appearance anymore, but I remember that he seemed calm and trustworthy. He pointed me in the right direction, but then something unexpected happened. Instead of just giving me directions and leaving, he decided to walk with me. At first, I wasn't completely comfortable. After all, he was still a stranger. So I kept one hand in my pocket holding my room keys and my phone just in case. But as we walked through the rain, he continued helping me. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't try to take me somewhere else. He simply wanted to make sure I got back safely. The walk felt much longer than it probably was. The rain kept coming down. The streets were almost empty, but eventually I saw the building where my school group was staying. I felt an incredible sense of relief. I thanked the man. He wished me well and disappeared back into the city. At that moment, I thought the worst part of the night was over. I entered the building and locked the door behind me. The place had automatic locking systems. The main entrance locked itself. The rooms locked themselves. I remember thinking, there's no way anyone can get inside unless they belong here. I felt safe again. I went back to my room, took a quick shower, and prepared for the few hours of sleep I had left before the bus ride home. My 3 roommates were already asleep. I climbed into my bunk bed and closed my eyes. Within minutes, I was gone. But what happened next is something I still think about years later, because sometime before 4 o'clock in the morning, I woke up. And when I opened my eyes, a flashlight was shining directly into my face. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Then I saw him. A stranger was standing inches away from my bed, looking directly at me. I couldn't move. My heart started racing. And for a few seconds, I had no idea how a complete stranger had entered our room. For a few seconds, I just stared at the stranger standing beside my bed. My mind was still trying to wake up. I was confused, scared, and completely frozen. A person I had never seen before was standing inches away from me in the middle of the night, shining a flashlight directly into my face. I quickly sat up in my bunk bed. My heart was pounding. I asked him in English, "Who are you?" The man didn't seem aggressive. He wasn't holding a weapon. He wasn't threatening me. But the situation was still terrifying, especially because my 3 roommates were still asleep around me, completely unaware of what was happening. The stranger calmly explained that he had come from the lobby. He said he was helping my friend Samuel find something he had lost. At first, I was even more confused. Samuel. I did have a friend named Samuel, and knowing him, he was the type of person who could easily lose something important at the worst possible time. So even though the situation felt strange, I tried to believe the explanation. The man stepped away from my bed and started looking through our belongings. He opened the closet. He checked bags. He moved things around. I watched him carefully. Something about it didn't feel right. I asked him, "What exactly did Samuel lose?" The man answered, "His visa." He said Samuel couldn't find his visa and that they needed to search for it before the trip home. A few moments later, another student from our school entered the room. He started talking to the man about the missing visa. They both began searching. That made the whole thing seem more believable. Other students from our group were apparently also awake and helping. Everyone was tired. Everyone was confused. Nobody was thinking clearly. And honestly, that was probably exactly what the man was counting on, because when you're exhausted at 4 o'clock in the morning, your brain doesn't work the same way. You don't question things as much. You just accept the easiest explanation. My roommates started waking up and asking the same questions I had. Who was this guy? Why was he in our room? Why was he searching through our things? I explained what the man had told me. I even mentioned that the situation felt strange. But after being awake for so long, and after seeing other students talking to him, I slowly convinced myself that everything was probably fine. The man continued searching through our belongings. I remember lying there, watching him move around the room. He was looking through the backpack of the guy sleeping across from me. Something about it bothered me, but I was exhausted. The adrenaline from waking up disappeared. My eyes became heavier, and eventually, I fell back asleep. The last thing I remember was staring at that man as he searched through someone else's bag. I had no idea at that moment that he wasn't looking for a lost visa. He was looking for something else. And by morning, we would discover the truth. When morning finally came, everything seemed normal at first. The sunlight came through the windows. People started waking up. Everyone was getting ready for the long bus ride back home. For a few minutes, the strange events from the night before almost felt like a dream. But then, people started talking, and we realized something was wrong. One student noticed that something was missing. Then another person checked their belongings. And then another. Slowly, the truth started coming out. 3 students were missing their things: a visa, a laptop, and other personal belongings. At first, nobody wanted to believe it. We were all confused. How could someone enter our building? How could someone walk into our rooms in the middle of the night? And more importantly, how did we let it happen? Then we realized the man who claimed he was helping Samuel find his missing visa was not helping anyone. He had never come from the lobby. He wasn't a friend. He wasn't connected to our school. He was a stranger who had somehow entered the building and created a story to make us trust him. The worst part was realizing how carefully he had planned it. He probably found out Samuel's name after seeing one of his belongings. Then he created a believable excuse. Your friend lost his visa. It sounded urgent. It sounded important. And because we were young, tired, and in a foreign country, we believed him. He used our confusion against us. While everyone was focused on helping Samuel, he was actually searching through our rooms and taking whatever he could find. And the most disturbing part? I still don't know how he got inside. The building had automatic locks. The main entrance was supposed to be secure. The rooms were supposed to be safe. But somehow, he managed to get in. The police arrived quickly after the school reported what happened. Our bus departure was delayed while the affected students gave statements and explained what was missing. Samuel and the others had to deal with replacing their documents and arranging everything they needed to return home. But the stranger was gone. There were no cameras that I knew of, no clear evidence, no explanation of who he was. To this day, we never found out what happened to him. But there is one part of the story that still bothers me. I couldn't stop thinking about my own role in what happened, because I was probably one of the last people to enter the building that night. After walking back through Brussels in the rain, maybe I didn't close the main door properly. Maybe someone followed me. Maybe he saw me enter. Maybe that was how he got inside. And there was another thought that bothered me even more. Why did he shine the flashlight directly into my face? Why did he wake me up? Why did he stand right beside my bed? Was it because he was trying to scare me? Was it because he recognized me? Or was he actually about to steal my phone and watch before I woke up? I'll never know. What I do know is this. That night taught me a lesson I never forgot. When you're traveling in another country, especially when you're young, you have to be careful about who you trust. Not everyone who offers help has good intentions. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who act like they are there to help you. And years later, I still think about that moment. Waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, opening my eyes, and seeing a stranger standing over me with a flashlight. In the late summer of 2019, my friends and I decided to take a trip to one of the most remote and beautiful places in the world, northern Norway, more specifically, an area located above the Arctic Circle called Lofoten. The region looked almost unreal. Massive mountains rising from the ocean, small fishing villages surrounded by untouched nature, long empty roads stretching between incredible landscapes. It was exactly the kind of place you go to escape the noise of everyday life. We flew into the nearest city, rented a car, and began our journey toward the small fishing village where we had booked an apartment. Because the area was so remote, the drive was going to take around 7 hours. There weren't many towns. There weren't many people. Just endless roads surrounded by mountains, water, and wilderness. Since I was the only person in our group who could drive, I was responsible for the entire journey. The roads were beautiful, but they also required a lot of attention. Norway takes road safety very seriously. Speed limits were strict, and police enforcement was known to be common. I tried my best to follow the rules, although I have to admit, on those long, empty roads, it was sometimes difficult. There were stretches where we could see the road continuing for miles ahead. No cars, no houses, nothing. Just us. As the evening went on, the sun began to disappear. Eventually, it was getting close to midnight. We had already completed most of the journey. The airport and larger towns were far behind us. Now, we only had about 40 minutes left before reaching our apartment. We had just passed the main town in the area when the road changed. A second lane appeared, creating an opportunity to overtake. That was when I noticed a Volkswagen Golf driving ahead of us. I moved into the passing lane and drove around him. Nothing unusual. I didn't speed aggressively, I didn't cut him off. I simply passed him and continued driving. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I went back to talking with my friends. Then suddenly, I noticed something in the rearview mirror. The Golf was extremely close behind us, almost too close. At first, I thought maybe he was just trying to pass us back, but he didn't. Instead, he started doing something strange. He would drive close to our bumper, then fall back, then get close again, over and over. My friend Jesse, who was sitting in the passenger seat, noticed it too. We looked at each other. Something felt wrong. Then it got worse. The driver turned on a massive floodlight mounted on the roof of his car. A bright beam of light suddenly filled our mirrors. It was so intense that it became distracting. I couldn't understand why he was doing it. Maybe he was angry that I had passed him. Maybe he thought I had been driving recklessly, but I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I decided not to react. I stayed calm, I kept driving, I followed the speed limit. I thought eventually he would get bored and leave, but he didn't. After several minutes, I quietly said to my friend, "Let's see if this guy follows us." A few moments later, we got our answer. He was still behind us. And that was when we started to realize this wasn't just a random driver on the road. He was following us. At first, we tried to stay calm. We kept telling ourselves there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe he was just driving the same direction. Maybe he was annoyed that we passed him. Maybe he would turn off somewhere. But the farther we drove, the more obvious it became. He wasn't leaving. He was following us. I decided to put some distance between our cars. I increased my speed slightly while still staying within the legal limit. For a moment, I thought maybe this would prove something. If he was just another driver, he would continue normally. If he was following us, he would catch up. But strangely, he didn't speed up. He stayed behind at a distance. That somehow made it even more unsettling. We were now entering a remote area. It was after midnight. There were almost no other cars on the road, no streetlights, no people, just darkness, mountains, and the sound of our own thoughts. Eventually, we reached a one-lane bridge with a traffic light. We had to stop. I looked in the mirror. My stomach dropped when I saw the Gulf coming around the corner. The light turned green. We continued driving, but instead of heading directly to our apartment, I made a decision. I didn't want to show this person where we were staying. If he really was following us, driving straight to our accommodation would be the worst thing we could do, so I started taking random turns through the village. Different streets, different directions. I wanted to see if he was actually following us, or if it was all in our heads. A few minutes later, my worst fear was confirmed. He followed every turn, every street, every direction. The Gulf was still behind us. Everyone in the car became nervous. Nobody was joking anymore. The excitement of the trip was gone. Now we were just trying to figure out what to do. And the situation became even more frightening because of where we were. This wasn't a crowded city. This wasn't somewhere we could easily find help. We were in a small Arctic village in the middle of the night. Eventually, I drove down a road that ended in a dead end. There was nowhere else to go. I had no choice but to turn the car around. As I turned, the Gulf moved in a way that made my heart race. It looked like he was trying to block us. For a moment, I thought we might be trapped, but the car was small enough that I managed to maneuver around him and get past. As we drove by, I finally got a clear look at the driver. I expected someone aggressive, someone angry. But what I saw was worse. His face was completely emotionless, cold, empty. His eyes stayed locked on us as we passed. He didn't look angry. He didn't look surprised. He just watched, like he had been waiting. There were 3 of us in the car. Part of me wanted to stop, get out, confront him, ask him what his problem was. But then reality hit me. We were in a remote area. It was the middle of the night. We were in a foreign country, and we had no idea what this person was capable of. In Norway, many people own firearms for hunting. For all we knew, he could have had something inside his vehicle. A person who follows strangers for nearly an hour at night is not someone you want to underestimate. So instead of confronting him, we made the safest choice. We decided to contact the police. But there was one problem. We barely knew the area. We didn't speak the language. And we had no idea where the nearest station was. Luckily, we managed to find a way to contact local authorities. The operator spoke English. We explained what was happening. They told us an officer would meet us at the station, but the station wasn't nearby. It was back in the main town we had already passed, around 40 minutes away. So we turned the car around and started driving toward the police station, with the Gulf still following directly behind us. The drive back toward the town felt completely different from before. Earlier that night, we were enjoying the scenery, the mountains, the ocean, the peaceful roads. But now, every second felt tense. I kept checking the rearview mirror, and every time I looked, the Gulf was still there, right behind us, following. The farther we drove, the more uncomfortable it became. We were heading toward the police station, but we still had no idea what this person wanted. Was he angry because I passed him? Was he trying to scare us? Was he waiting for us to stop somewhere? We had no answers. As we got closer to the town, things changed. We started seeing more houses, more lights, more signs of civilization. For the first time in a while, I felt slightly safer. Then I noticed something strange. The Gulf started slowing down. At first, I thought maybe he was finally giving up. Maybe he realized we were going somewhere he didn't want to follow. But then I checked the mirror again. 2 other cars appeared. They were waiting near the side of the road. One pulled out in front of the Gulf. Another moved behind him. Suddenly, it wasn't just one car following us anymore. There were 3 vehicles traveling together, a convoy, a group. And that was the moment we became truly scared. Because the question wasn't just, why is this one person following us? Now it was, who are these other people? And why did they join him? We continued toward the police station using Google Maps. The location was in an industrial harbor area. There were warehouses, dark side streets, large empty parking areas. It was exactly the kind of place where you don't want to be followed at night. When we finally arrived, something felt wrong. The police station was there, but it was completely dark. No lights, no obvious activity. For a moment, we thought nobody was inside. We contacted the operator again. They reassured us that an officer was on the way, so we stayed in the car, waiting, watching. The 3 vehicles were nearby, not close enough to approach us, but close enough that we knew they were still there. They were moving around the area, almost like they were waiting to see what we would do. Those few minutes felt much longer than they actually were. Everyone in the car was nervous. The girls in our group were visibly shaken. Nobody knew what would happen next. Then suddenly, a large male police officer appeared. He walked out from behind the building. The moment he saw us, he could tell something serious had happened. He spoke with us. We explained everything. The following, the floodlight, the random turns, the 3 cars, the fear. At first, he seemed calm, almost too calm. But when he saw how scared everyone was, especially the others in our group, his attitude changed. He understood that even if nothing illegal had happened yet, the situation was still dangerous. He offered to escort us out of town. He said he would bring a police vehicle and follow us. Finally, we felt like we weren't alone anymore. We started driving. The police vehicle followed behind us. For the first time that night, I felt a small sense of relief. Maybe this nightmare was finally ending. But as we left the town, the Gulf appeared again. And this time, he wasn't alone. As we drove away from the police station, I kept checking the mirrors. The police vehicle was behind us. For the first time all night, we had someone on our side. I thought maybe the person following us would finally stop. Maybe seeing a police vehicle would be enough to make him leave us alone. But I was wrong. As we moved through the dark streets, something happened. 2 of the other cars suddenly pulled out from side roads. They appeared beside us. And then the Golf. The same Golf that had started everything drove right past us, slowly. The driver looked directly at me as he passed. That same cold, emotionless stare, like he wanted me to know he was still there. I couldn't believe it. Even with police nearby, he was still following. I immediately reacted. I pressed the horn several times. I slammed on the brakes. I was trying to make sure the officer understood. That was the person. That was the car. That was the guy who had been following us for almost an hour. For a few seconds, everything was still. I looked into the mirror, waiting. Then, to my relief, the police vehicle turned on its lights. The officer pulled forward and blocked the Golf. Finally, something was happening. The police had stopped him. My friend Jesse immediately jumped out of our car and ran toward the police vehicle to see what was going on. After a moment, I followed. At that point, I felt like this was our best chance. We had a police officer there. We had witnesses. And we finally had the person who had been making us feel unsafe all night. When I reached the back of the police vehicle, I saw him, the driver of the Golf, the same man who had been following us. He looked completely normal, not angry, not nervous, just calm, like nothing unusual had happened. He spoke with the officer. From what I could hear, he had a thick Russian or Eastern European accent. He seemed confused about why we were making such a big deal. The officer questioned him, but then came the frustrating part. Technically, he hadn't broken any laws. He was driving on public roads. He hadn't threatened us. He hadn't touched our vehicle. He hadn't committed a crime. Following someone by itself is not always enough for police to arrest someone. The officer explained that there was only so much he could do. However, he took the man's information. He made a record of the situation, and he warned that if the man came near us again, we should contact the police immediately. It wasn't the outcome we hoped for, but at least we finally had something. A name, a record, a direct contact number. The officer then kept his promise. He escorted us out of town. We drove through the dark roads with the police vehicle behind us. I kept checking the mirrors, waiting to see those headlights again. But this time, nothing happened. Eventually, the officer left us at the edge of town. He couldn't follow us all the way back to our apartment. And suddenly, We were alone again. The relief disappeared because the reality came back. We were still in a remote area. It was still the middle of the night, and we still didn't know who that man was or why he had followed us. I decided not to take any chances. Instead of driving directly to our apartment, I parked the car somewhere else. We walked the remaining distance. We locked ourselves inside. And for the first time since this started, we were finally able to breathe. But one question kept bothering all of us: the two extra cars. Who were they? Why did they appear? And what exactly had they planned to do? Because that was the part that made this whole experience truly terrifying. One strange driver could have been a coincidence, but three vehicles working together, that felt like something else entirely. That night in Norway changed the way I looked at traveling forever. When we first arrived in the Arctic Circle, everything felt peaceful. The landscape was breathtaking. The roads were empty. The villages were quiet. It felt like one of the safest and most beautiful places we had ever visited. But that night showed us how quickly a peaceful place can become terrifying. The scariest part wasn't just the driver of the Golf. It wasn't even the fact that he followed us for nearly an hour. The part that still bothers me the most is the unknown. We never found out why he chose us. We never discovered what he wanted. And we never learned who those other two cars belonged to. Were they friends? Were they strangers who happened to be nearby? Or were they part of something bigger? We'll probably never know. The officer did everything he could. He documented the situation. He escorted us out of town. And he made sure we were safe as far as he was able. But the truth was, there was no crime he could charge the man with. No threat he could prove. No reason to hold him. The driver was free to leave. And that was a strange feeling. Knowing that the person who had been watching us all night could simply drive away. The rest of our trip actually went well. We continued exploring northern Norway. We saw incredible landscapes. We visited beautiful locations. We enjoyed the adventure we originally came for. And looking back, Lofton really is one of the most stunning places I have ever been. But every now and then, I still think about that night, about the empty roads, about the bright floodlight shining into our mirrors, about the Golf appearing every time we turned, about the driver's expression when we finally passed him, completely calm, completely emotionless, like he knew exactly what he was doing. Traveling is one of the greatest experiences a person can have. You get to see new places, meet different people, experience cultures you never imagined. But there is always a risk when you step into unfamiliar territory. Sometimes danger doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it doesn't look like danger. Sometimes it's just a normal-looking person in an ordinary car following you through the darkness. That night taught me an important lesson. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, don't ignore it. Because before we contacted the police, we spent a long time trying to convince ourselves that everything was fine. Maybe he was just driving the same direction. Maybe he was just annoyed. Maybe we were overreacting. But deep down, we knew something wasn't right, and that feeling was what kept us safe. Because if we had driven directly to our apartment, if we had shown him where we were staying, if we had stopped somewhere isolated, the ending could have been completely different. To this day, I still think about that road in northern Norway, a road surrounded by mountains and darkness, a road where we thought we were alone, but we weren't. Someone was behind us the entire time, and even years later, I still wonder what would have happened if we hadn't found that police station.